Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our favorite co-host.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
You know, I know you have a real good memory, so you know what we talked about yesterday.
Something.
And, you know, we were talking about an event that was pretty big, and that was
Yeah.
Venezuela and the coming coup and what would happen, and there were some pros and cons and who's on whose side. Well, Guaido called for a coup, and guess what? Not too many people showed up. You know, and but the trouble is still brewing. It may, you know, the neocons just have to backtrack a little bit and make new plans, and I'm sure they're in the middle of that right now. But I think they've admitted it was a total failure.
Yeah.
You know, they're not trying to claim that, you know, a few things, but they're looking around for the blame.
Yeah.
It's Russia's fault.
That's right.
You know, even though Russia's been in Venezuela for a long time, we didn't want to deal with them, and they're in business down there and under invitation. But Pompeo said that the whole problem was that they had a deal, and Maduro agreed to go because he was under pressure and he had to leave, and he wasn't going to fight this out. So they had the plane ready to go.
Yeah.
You know, and he said, Russia came. Russia said, don't leave. And Maduro says, oh, okay, I'll stay. So, of course, the tone I've exaggerated a bit, but there's probably a lot of truth in what I said, you know, that except for the fact that he probably had no plans to leave whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it's just the stirring up the opposition. So it's ongoing. It's probably going to get more serious, and even though things are calmed down, they said by afternoon things had calmed down because the people who supported the coup didn't show up too much. So they had calmed down a bit, but they're not going away. It's going to continue. And our Secretary of State, you know, who has a fair amount of clout, you know, he's close to have the trigger on the big one.
Yeah.
He says, we'll take care of that. You know, this might require violence. This might call, and he didn't say military, but that's what they're implying, that this will be necessary. I think that it's obvious that is not an easy decision because they're idiots that they do it.
Yeah, no kidding.
but that doesn't mean that we haven't done so many idiotic things over time. You know, there were a few individuals way back in the first part of this century in 2002 and 3 that it would be an idiocy to invade Iraq.
Yeah.
But they did, and they're still complaining that it must have been Russia's fault. It didn't work out so well. But this is still a big day on decisions, and the UN may make a statement, and there'll be some meetings, and they're going to declare. But this hasn't gone away yet. But I do believe that definitely Maduro is stronger today than he was yesterday morning.
Yeah, and Guaido, the U.S. picked president, is really shown to be fairly weak. And in fact, his own opposition, his own allies, as soon as they were able to, they went and they sprung the other guy, Leopoldo Lopez, who was the real leader of the opposition. But, you know, Pompeo's point was really important, I think, because it serves two purposes. One is to blame Russia, and the other one is it's a kind of a crude psychological operation against the Venezuelan people. Because, okay, the thing fizzled. Oh, it's all Russia's fault. But by saying, oh, the plane was on the tarmac, Maduro was ready to go, it conveys to the Venezuelan people that their leader thought it was a lost cause. And so they're going to be less hesitant. The purpose, the intended purpose, this is always done in a coup. Remember, Assad's ready to leave. Saddam Hussein is looking for the next plane out. They always do this because they want to they want to have the population start feeling downhearted, not going out to these rallies, not supporting. So this really is kind of a crude propaganda. The president's only out to save his own skin. He's not going to help you guys. And so that really is what it is. And plus you also, of course, de facto, you always have to blame the Russians for what happened.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of the late 50s and early 60s when we were always going to have a victory, you know, against Castro.
Yeah.
And every time our victory didn't come to fruition, Castro became stronger.
Yeah.
And we spent all these years on all the sanctions and all the suffering. And now I don't think there's any doubt there's a lot of children suffering right now from medications and food and the whole business. And of course, it's all Guaido's fault. The claim is, but this is something that is very, very deadly and something that is not going to go away. And we're in the middle of it. I'd like to just stop the aggression down there. You know, why is one group aggressing against the other? Oh, that means I should go to D.C. and talk to a few people if we want to stop all the aggression. Oh no, the only aggressors, outside aggression, is committed by Russia.
Yeah.
Russia and China are the aggressors. They're in there. And see, we're Americans and we haven't aggressed. We don't even have anybody there. Oh, yeah, a couple CIA people and a couple special forces, and we have a little bit there. And so the situation there is such that we're going to be reading about this for a few days, and there may be a big break one way or the other. But right now, I think Maduro is a lot stronger than yesterday. But who knows what'll come?
Well, the neocons aren't going to give up easy, and they're mad, they're frustrated that it didn't work out like they wanted. And listen to this. I mean, imagine if you're a South American country, especially the ones that are allied to the U.S. They're trying to convince their population that they're not just toadies, they're not just on Uncle Sam's leash. Here's what Bolton said about Russia. He said, "This is our hemisphere. It's not where the Russians ought to be interfering. This is a mistake on their part." And of course, we have our troops and our tanks and our bombs right on their border. That's okay. But can you imagine how you feel if you're a different country? The U.S. says, "This is our hemisphere."
Yeah, I think Ukraine and a few other places over there are pretty close to Russia. But that's one thing that doesn't seem to stir up too many Americans concerned about the hypocrisy of it all. You know, this whole thing that we're fighting for freedom and democracy. That's the only reason we're there.
Constitution.
And we're not for participating in coup. And just look, when the Russians tried to do it with us, it brought us together, Republicans and Democrats. We had to condemn this Russia interference in our elections. But when we get together, the whole group, all the groups get together. I've been impressed how well they have functioned with their public relations, because when you think about it, there's no Republican leader that is suggesting, maybe this is not a good idea on foreign policy. And what about a Democratic leadership? You'd think they're in opposition. They should. And it's all, if the Democrats complain, is that they're not being aggressive enough.
Yeah.
So, but the media, absolutely down the line. And but we shouldn't be too worried about that, because we have Republican TV stations and Democrat TV stations, and there'll be a balance, fair and balanced. But no, they all saying the same thing. That we got to take care of them and help this coup. But that to me is a real tragedy. And the other tragedy is, what else should you have expected, except people haven't gotten to the point where they could take a presidential candidate, his word for it.
Yeah.
And I remember, Bush arguing against nation building and policing the world and a humble foreign policy, and there was none of that in his mind or intent. And then he had other excuses to do something. But here we go. Now we're concerned about this, and there's no doubt that our president said some things that we thought, well, this isn't too bad. He still comes up with an idea too, but it doesn't look like we're going to be, saying, well, way to go in North Korea. I think that's done for now. I don't think they'll get back to even talking with them again. Yeah. But just a few people that are very much involved in this operation. Of course, there's the vice president. He's no peace lover.
Yeah.
He's a wild hawk. Bolton, we know all about him. Pompeo, we're in the news every day, and he wants to expand the power. And no, we don't talk about it, don't read about it in the mail, because it's a secret organization, and that's Gina Haspel.
Yeah.
And she's CIA. She may be kingpin, because she probably threatens them, if you don't do what we tell you, we might torture you.
Yeah, bloody Gina.
And then your old buddy that you've talked about before is Elliot Abrams.
Oh, yeah.
He's right in the front lines right now, and he's in his glory. There was a time when he got into a little trouble, I think, but he's back in the fold of the neocons.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked earlier about the media. Talk about propaganda. I noticed yesterday there were 2 separate Bloomberg articles admonishing their readers, don't you dare call it a coup. It's not a coup because the other guy really is the president. Trying to police our language. It's just amazing. But, John Bolton also has something to say. Pompeo did his little psyop. Bolton did his own. He made a video. It was a weird video, about a minute long. And absolutely this had the purpose of, had a psychological purpose. He actually went and he named the names of the top-ranking Venezuelan leaders, including the head of the military, intelligence, and other. He named them by name and said, you guys said you were with us and you didn't turn like you said. And of course, I'm sure it was an absolute lie, my guess. But what is the purpose? What does it do? It's going to sow some suspicion. If you're Maduro or if you're the top guys, hey, why did he say that? Is there something to that? And that's the purpose of all of this, no question.
No, there's no doubt about it. Most of this stuff is PR. Look how long it took Bush to get the people excited about going into Iraq. I remember it was months and months before we did that. He immediately went into Afghanistan, but I remember all the propaganda and all the lies told about what Hussein was doing. A bad guy, but it wasn't enough to get the American people excited. You had to find out that he was killing babies on purpose and that sort of thing. And already you start hearing this about here. These sanctions are really hurting the children, and therefore we have to do something. And it's all one-sided. It's such a tragedy that so much of this, I keep thinking, is preventable. No, yes, they would have. Venezuela has problems. They had too much government intervention, but I think we have way too much government intervention in our economy and our personal liberties here. And so he's doing that, and we say, well, we have to go ahead and do this now, but I don't see how we're going to be backing off from this. I think they're very determined on staying with this fight.
They'll think of something new. The one thing I mentioned toward the end of the show yesterday, it had just happened, is that there needs to be a casus belli. There needs to be some big event that happens that catalyzes, gives an excuse, let's put it that way, for U.S. intervention. And I suggested at the time, there was an armed personnel carrier that plowed into a group of the demonstrators. They weren't demonstrators; they were involved in the coup, and that has been replayed and replayed. Look at a guy who's going to run over his own people. This is really bad. But a couple of shocking. It's unpleasant. It was hard to watch. But a couple of things I think to consider: they weren't peaceful protesters. They were throwing Molotov cocktails at these military transport vehicles. Okay, did they deserve to get run over? If you're in a military coup and you're acting as a combatant, unfortunately, those kinds of things have happened. And what's interesting is just today, you'll see far worse happening on the streets of Paris with the yellow vests. No one says a word. How many eyes have been shot out? People shot in the head and everything. So it just goes to show that all protests aren't equal.
People got to looking more at Venezuela in the last year or more. But we've been involved for a long time, to some degree, 10 years ago. But there's a case that can be made that the sanctions put on in 2017 were massive and very harmful. And if you look at the statistics, things went way downhill after that. So yes, it is true. Their socialist system is very detrimental and was a major contributor. But these last 2 years, with the real deterioration, has been due to our sanctions that we put on them. And yet it just sets the stage more for motivating people and say, see, it is so terrible. We have to save those people from themselves, and therefore we have to go in and tell them about democracy and tell them about freedom, because we are the experts, and that's how we can make their country great again.
Yeah, exactly. And so a couple of things are going to happen today, and I think this really reflects how serious things are, with Pompeo saying we will use force if it's necessary in Venezuela. We know that there are Russian troops there. We know that Russia has a long alliance with Venezuela. So Pompeo was scheduled to speak with Lavrov today about this issue. The Russians are very upset about being blamed for talking Maduro out of leaving. They call it, quote, fake news. And there also will be a 2 o'clock Eastern Time meeting of the U.S. National Security Council with all the principals in the room. These are the top guys, and they're going to be pushing Trump for war, is my guess. They're going to be push, push, push. This is what they're going to say. So really it'll be a question of what happens. But things are moving rapidly, and I think this has a potential of really being a serious situation, possibly even bigger than we can imagine. Let's hope not. But so a lot of people will say, well, so why are you guys so obsessed with this coup? What's the big deal? Get rid of this old socialist. We'll put in a new guy. What's the problem? What's wrong with you guys? Why are you so obsessed? Well, the thing that concerns me the most, and I think probably Dr. Paul shares this, the neocons get away with this. They're going to keep going. They're going to be emboldened. They try small, they keep going, they keep going. You know they have their sights on Iran next for a coup. You know they have their sights on Russia and China. If these guys are allowed to completely take over and be successful in this, they're only just getting warmed up, and it's going to be a lot worse. So it's not that we care about Maduro. We care about our own country. We care about the people that are taking control of it and putting us at real risk of a nuclear conflagration. We don't want that. We don't need it.
Yes, and I think it is going to be tough going for the next several months, probably, Don, in Venezuela. But the individuals that I mentioned, Daniel has talked about, those neocons who are really in charge of this whole policy down there. I don't know how that can be handled other than they shouldn't be there. As long as they're there, we keep hoping, well, somebody has to stop them. Trump, stop them. They're going in the wrong direction, but they're there and they shouldn't be there. I don't daydream about this. It's not going to happen, but I keep thinking, what if they ask me for my opinion what should be done about foreign policy? Well, those 4 or 5 individuals, I'd fire them all. Tell them to fire them and get somebody else in there, somebody that believes and understands what our Constitution talks about us having national sovereignty, defending our country, believing in liberty, and not believing that we are the policeman and king of the world. And as long as that is the case, and we continue to participate in coups numerously times, and we continue to do it, then the whole country and all the media, Republican, Democrats, get hysterical when they concoct some fake news and said Russia is manipulating with our election, and Russia has caused all these troubles. They have their problems. They were a menace, I'll tell you, during the hot Cold War when the Soviet system existed. But I tell you, they should worry about their problems. I don't think they're in Venezuela for any reason compared to the Soviets being in Cuba. It has no relationship whatsoever. And our job as individuals, as Americans, I think, is to be introspective. Look at what we are and what we do. And are we responsible for any of that? And what could we do? Well, maybe just following the rules instead of saying, well, this is special and we have to do it differently. And yes, you just can't sit back because the enemy is going to take over the whole world and own the whole world. But we own most of the weapons, and right now we own most of the wealth, and therefore people aren't going to do that. We don't have to fear the loss of our liberties except from our own government. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.